Welcome to today's Planning Committee meeting. I'm Councillor John Ward and will be chairing the Planning Committee meeting today. On the top table are Officers Claire Curtis, Glenn Beaumont, Tim Parker, Chris Rickman, Helen Mellors, the Vice Chairman Karen Vincent and Dawn Matthews, the Committee Officer. The fire safety notice will now be read out.
Thank you, Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We are not expecting a fire drill today, so if the fire alarm sounds, we will need to evacuate the building. There are two fire exits from this room. One is through the double doors where you came in, and the other is to the right of the stage, which leads to an external fire escape. Please note that you should not use the lift in the event of a fire, and in the event of an evacuation, we need to meet to the left of the driveway at the main entrance of Thorpe Lodge. Thank you.
This meeting is being live streamed. Members of the public are welcome to film proceedings as long as they are not disruptive to the conduct of the meeting. If anyone wishes to film or record the meeting, will you please identify yourselves now? Please can you all ensure that your mobile phones and electronic devices are turned to silent. Councillors, please do not use your mobile phone whilst the committee is in session. We will have comfort breaks at various times throughout the meeting. If you must use your mobile, then please leave the room. However, you will appreciate that this could result in you not being able to vote on the matter under discussion at the time you leave the room. The order of business is as set out on the agenda. Members of the public can only speak if prior arrangements have been made in accordance with the Council's scheme of public speaking. The time allocated is a maximum of 5 minutes per speaker. Only people who have registered to speak will be able to address the committee. The order will be as follows. The planning officer will present the application. Public speakers will then be asked to present their case, followed by questions from members of the committee to clarify something the speaker has said and not to invite the speaker to put further points across. The order of public speaking is Parish Town Council first, followed by objectors, and finally supporters. Council members who are not members of this committee will then be invited to speak for the allocated time of a maximum of 5 minutes for each speaker. This will be followed by questions from members of the committee. Again, these questions will only be to clarify something the speaker has said and not to invite the speaker to put further points across. The committee will then discuss and determine the application. Finally, there is no provision for members of the public to circulate documents, photographs, etc. at the meeting. Are there any questions before I open the meeting, please? No? Thank you. We'll go to agenda item 1, declarations of interest. And I'll just first of all declare a joint interest for all members on item 5, Furbank, Green Lane, Horsford, as we all had an email lobbying on that application. Right, any further declarations? Councillor Nerdon.
Thank you, Chairman. In respect of application number 2022-0923, the Freethorpe application, I am a member of the Freethorpe Parish Council. I have listened in on the discussions. I have not taken part, nor have I indicated whether I'm in favour or against this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further declarations of interest? No, thank you. Apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I've received apologies from Councillor Brennan and Councillor Nerdon is his substitute, and also apologies from Councillor Fisher and Councillor Folger.
Okay, thank you. Right. Minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of October, those that were present. Do you have any comments on the accuracy of those minutes, please? Are you happy that I sign those as a true record of that meeting? Yes, thank you. Are there any matters arising from those minutes? No, thank you. And we go straight on to the applications. And the first application, 2021-2094, land north of Damgate Lane. So we'll go to the Claire Curtis, the officer, to present that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The application in front of you is a proposal that seeks consent for 4 self-build dwellings at Damgate Lane in Acle. The application is an outline with the main means of access forming part of that outline, with the remainder of the matters reserved for the reserved matters application to come in the future. The application is outside the development boundary for Acle, but immediately adjacent to the development boundary. So this is an aerial shot. The development boundary is located here. Just while we're on this particular slide, I'll point out the context. So on the opposite side of the road, you have residential properties, and to the west here, you have a motor repair, small business here, and then you have an industrial estate located to this side, with a sewage treatment plant works just a bit further down the road. This is a plan showing you the site in context of Acle. The location is located here with your industrial estates, and the application site is said, and it just gives you some key points to where the services are within the village and town. So this is the development boundary that we've referred to on red here, and this is your site. So I've got a closer plan in a moment, but it's showing you the proximity to the development boundary, which I think is very key in the determination of this application. So, as I say, the proposal is for 4 dwellings. There is an existing substantial frontage hedge here, which will be in element partly need to be removed to the corner to provide visibility, but in the whole part will remain. Also key to this consideration is the site is within the flood zone 1, where the dwellings are, and just touches on the corner here, which was showing you on a plan, is flood zone 2, which is just for you to consider and bear in mind through the presentation. So just to go through the photographs to give you a context before I get into the presentation. So this is the main site entrance. You can see the hedgerow. This is a stud in the south of where the hedgerow is and the main entrance, looking at the application site. This is looking back from the back of the field, and there's the hedgerow, which is where the road is here. And this is, you can just see the motor repairs service business located there. That's another photograph of the motor servicing repair workshop. And this is stood with the site entrance here, looking back towards Acorn. You can see the residential properties, and that's where the development boundary ends at the present time. This is directly opposite your site, so your context of your dwellings that you have in the area. Again, this is a photograph of the hedge, which you can see is substantial and does form part of our considerations of the proposal. And this is your industrial estate. Again, your boundary hedge looking towards April, and your dwellings on the other side. So hopefully that gives members a clear context of the actual street scene and the application site itself. So moving on to the considerations, the site is outside the development boundary, but also key for our thought process and as termination is that it is also outside the catchment area for nutrient neutrality. At this point in time, we are unable to demonstrate a 5-year supply of deliverable houses as a council in the short term because of this short-lived reduction due to the nutrient neutrality impacts. So we need to bear that in mind in our consideration. In view of that, we have done this application has been assessed via a tilted balance with the lack of land supply, where we were looking at what benefits the provision of 4 dwellings is in terms of a strong material consideration against any harms caused in context of sustainable development. So in the particular benefits, it's obviously providing housing to meet that undersupply, but also in the short term, it provides economic benefits via construction, and in the long term, the spending of future occupants. If we then turn to the impacts, The site itself, as you can see it on the plan in front of you, or the aerial in front of you, does create a landscape break and a visual separation between the western end of Damgate and the industrial estate. The addition of 4 dwellings will change the character of this area. We don't dispute that. However, there is a substantial hedge to the front which will be retained with the exception of the break required for the access and the visibility. And it would also, in our view, create a continuation of the existing linear built form, which is characteristic of this part of Acorn. In this particular instance, the context of the site and being immediately adjacent to the development boundary are a strong material consideration in favour of the proposal. It is considered, therefore, while there will be an impact or harm, this is not so significantly and demonstrably harmful to outweigh the benefit of that provision of the housing in a sustainable location to meet that 5-year land supply. In turning to other matters, in terms of residential amenity, whilst a specific design is reserved, it is considered as an appropriate scheme and design layout can be provided under the reserved matters to not give rise to an adverse impact on the existing amenities of the properties to the west or to the east via overlooking, overbearing impact, loss of light or loss of privacy, etc. In terms of highway, no objections have been raised by your highway authority, as sufficient space is being provided for parking and manoeuvring within the site and an appropriate safe access. The Highway Authority have requested a new footpath link to enable the site to link up to existing footways is provided via this application. And the application has plan shows a footpath on the opposite side of the road and would be conditioned as part of any consent. In terms of drainage and flood risk, the site is located, as I pointed out before, within flood zone 1, with part of the gardens of plot 3 and 4 in flood zone 2. Specific details of the surface water drainage is not provided as part of the application. However, your officers are satisfied that under the reserved matters, an appropriate means of surface water can be provided satisfactorily. There are no further issues in terms of ecology, heritage or tree issues with the application. So to conclude, Chairman, having regard to the context of not having a deliverable 5-year supply, it is considered the benefits of providing additional housing are not significantly and demonstrably outweighed by the negative landscape impact of the scheme. And as such, as a whole, the scheme represents a sustainable development. In light of us having a short-term supply, we have, in line with an appeal decision that has been received most recently, suggested a reduced time limit to ensure the site is delivered in an expedient manner. I therefore recommend the application is given authorisation for approval, Chairman, subject to conditions outlined on the agenda and to a unilateral undertaking relating to diagrams and the self-build. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions for the officer, please? Councillor Karimi.
Claire, can you tell me who's going to take ownership of the hedgerow at the front to make sure it's not taken out in the future?
So part of the conditions we said is that we would expect that hedgerow to be retained as part of the development. So it would be up to the developer to ascertain how that's kept, whether that's kept within plots or whether the developer then has a separate agreement to retain it to the front. So, but our intention is, because it is material in terms of the impact, that the condition is imposed to make sure that that hedge is retained in perpetuity.
Do you know who's going to maintain that hedge in the future? Because it will grow. It needs to be cut back at some time.
Yeah. My assumption is that the owners of the developer that would be part of that sales and agreement to who actually has ownership and maintains that. The applicant, the agent is here, who I'm sure would be able to answer that further in the public speaking, if that is of help.
Yes, Councillor Beadle.
Also concerning the hedge, Chairman, can you remind us what species of tree and bushes hedging it is, please?
I suggest. I would suggest by the photographs, if we just have a quick look, I think it's probably a native species. We've got quite a good photograph of this hedge, you know, I'll just find it for us. So it looks to me like that's a native hedgerow.
Sorry, Chairman, there are native and native, isn't there?
You may
I wonder if one of the other speakers, when they come along, can actually identify that, please, Chair.
Okay. Right. Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Chairman. Mine was also about the hedgerow. I noticed that the parish council had raised concern about that. And I just wondered if any consideration been given to transfer that hedgerow to the parish council with appropriate funding so that they could be reassured it's maintained and looked after. But obviously they would need the funding transferred to be able to do that.
Again, as I say, I know the agent is in the room, would perhaps be able to help us answer that question when they come to their speaking point. Clarification.
Yeah.
Can I just add a point to that? I mean, that's something that could be agreed separate to the agreement, but not a requirement of the planning recommendation, because the planning recommendation is to retain that hedge. But obviously, if the applicant wants to consider that with the parish, that would be outside, I think, in our recommendation today, because I think from a planning point of view, what we need to ensure is the hedge is retained. It doesn't matter who owns that. It could be the applicant retains it as a management company, as Claire has said, or it could be it goes into the ownership of the individual dwellings, or it could be they could offer it up to the parish, as you suggest. But I think for the purpose of us today, it's important that we look to seek retention of the hedge, regardless of who eventually owns it.
Right. Do any other councillors have points to raise? Yes, Councillor.
Yeah, it's just if you could just clarify the point about nutrient neutrality issue and the 5-year land supply. As I understand, up and down the country, you know, there's different areas of the country where this has affected various local authorities, and I think it's been taken as a given. Even though you're giving applications, you on paper may have a 5-year land supply. Nutrient neutrality is holding that up. So how could we be penalised in terms of 5-year land supply because of that issue that's occurred? So if you could just clarify that, that'd be really helpful.
So at the moment, for the purposes of considering current applications, because some of the current applications are held up, the deliverability of these sites means as a temporary short-term, it will be short-term lived until we can issue those and have a guarantee that when they will be delivered, we cannot demonstrate a land supply. This site, however, is not caught up with nutrients neutrality because it's outside the catchment area. So in this case, we do need to do that tilted balance, but it won't apply for all applications, as you'll see later on the agenda, because it depends on whether there are any conflicts with the local plan as a whole. But for this particular case, we do need to engage that tilted balance. But for the reason Claire has outlined, it being adjacent to the development boundary in any effect, with no other objections from the statutory consultations, and we don't feel there is significant harm, we can look to recommend this one for approval with that unilateral agreement and conditioning that self-build.
Any further questions from councillors? No, thank you. And if Mr. Parker and Mr. Barber would like to come forward and take these seats, please. Morning, gentlemen. You have 5 minutes each from when you start. Thank you.
Morning. Thank you very much for allowing us to speak today. I'm Jason Parker from Parker Planning Services, and I've got Jason Barber with me, who's the architect on the scheme. We've worked on this together. I thought that was a wonderful and clear presentation from the officers, and they answered your questions really well. In terms of the hedge, all of the options that you heard are available. We love the hedge, the landowner loves it, so does the parish council. And we want it to be retained, and we're happy with that condition. And yeah, just to move forward, obviously nutrient neutrality is a really big consideration. That stops the deliverability of about half of Norfolk. This site, thankfully, is outside the catchment zone. It means it can come forward now and can be delivered now. Before we got involved with this, the landowners previously had people advising them to look at 20 houses or schemes which were larger. When we looked at this, we thought that was wrong. What we've presented to you is what we believe is a proportional scheme. It means the dwellings are outside the flood zones, 2 and 3, and we believe it conforms to the characteristics of the area and is reasonable. And the major benefit of this scheme is self-build. I believe this is probably the only scheme in Broadland which will specifically provide for self-build where there is a unilateral undertaking. And during this process, it doesn't happen often, but we've actually had members of the public getting in touch with us and expressing interest in those plots, telling us that they cannot find self-built plots in Broadland. And in particular, those people have got a connection to Acle and they want to be there. We feel quite emotionally connected to this site. We were both raised in Acle and went to the school there. We know the site very well. And we've been working with the landowners on this, and we believe that this would be a wonderful and positive scheme all round, enabling self-build and making sure the community are happy with it as well. The parish council raised no objection, providing the hedge is retained, and we're happy to do that, and we're very pleased to have their support on this. And you'll note that there was only one objection to this application as well. So with all that in mind, we hope that you can support this scheme, and thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please do.
Yeah, I just quickly looked on the tree report that was submitted with the application, and I can confirm it is mainly, now excuse my not my knowledge on this, is Myrobalan plum. Is it Myrobalan plum? That is the hedge. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Right, councillors, do you have any questions for the speakers?
Chairman, that's
Yes.
Bullis to me and you, isn't it?
Is it? Oh, right. Okay, good, yes. Some nice edible fruits then. Good. Right, yes, councillor.
Just the report says there's 4 letters of objections, and the applicant just said that, sorry, yes, the applicant just said, or the agent just said there's 1, which is correct. Yes, in the
4.10 of the report, this is 1 letter of objection has been received with regards to the following concerns, Chairman.
I thought I saw 4 letters of objection in summary here, but I must be confused. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for the speakers, please? No? Okay, gentlemen, if you'd like to resume your seats, please. And over to you, councillors. Yes, so you're moving approval. Yes, councillor Karimi.
Sorry, go back to the hedge again. I'm just conscious that in my own ward, there's been pieces of land with hedging on, needs to be cut back, and no one will take responsibility. So can we put in the conditions later on whoever takes ownership of that hedge has to maintain it?
We could, if the condition doesn't already say it, we can say the hedge shall be retained and maintained. So that will cover that.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm happy to, yes, councillor Beadle.
Sorry, Chairman, I'm happy to propose, but that hedge is more than one species, going by the different profiles of the different bushes and trees. But nevertheless, I'm happy to second it, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Vincent.
Just an observation, and one concern I had was about the footpath link, but I'm pleased to see that's been added as a condition. So that's addressed my concern on that one. The other, I welcome self-build sites. I do actually have one in my ward of O'Catton where it has been developed out. One plea, and I don't know if this how we could deal with this, but one thing that we found there as a learning when you have a series of self-build sites if each of them are connecting their own services, that can cause a real disruption locally, that the road's being dug up multiple times for each individual plot. So if there's any way of adding a condition that the services are connected to the sites so that the road only has to be dug up once, I think that's a positive thing to do if that's possible.
Thank you, Chairman. I think given the fact that it is self-build, we would, to help that develop out in the manner that we'd wish to see, so we would wish to do a phasing condition on it anyway, so to ensure that the services and the access are brought forward to service at one time. So, and it also helps the developer and the applicant to be able to then put in individual reserve matters for each plot. So that's, we would do a phasing condition, and that benefits both the council and the developers as well.
Right. Any further comments from councillors? No. Well, it's proposed by Councillor Leggett and seconded by Councillor Beadle that we go with officer's recommendation with the addition of maintenance of hedgerow, retention and maintenance of hedgerow. So all those in favour, please.
It's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Right, thank you. So next application, 2022-1213, land at Brandeston Road, Corston. Officer Tim Baker to present, please. Tim Barker, sorry.
Okay, thank you. So this is a site to the south of Corston. It's just outside, but adjacent to the settlement boundary of the village. Here you can see the site, the with built-up development to the north and east, which are within the settlement limit, and then open countryside to the south and west. The proposal is to erect 5 dwellings. It's an outline application. This is an indicative layout which shows how the site could be laid out, with the 3 self-built dwellings here, and then the 2 build-to-rent dwellings proposed here. To the south, it is proposed to create an area of woodland with a pond. There's actually ought to be some tree planting into the south of this field, but this would greatly develop on that. Let's take you through a few photos here. So this is looking out from the southern end of the existing development of the village down Brandeston Road. This is the area which is to be developed. You can see the existing dwellings to the east on the eastern boundary. And then looking from the south, there's the northern, sort of dwellings on the northern boundary, which are single stories. You can see the development would be in here. And then this is looking down the road from within the village with the existing development on the left. You'll note the narrowness of the road, lack of pedestrian facilities, which is one of the main concerns with the proposal. This is looking then from the site into the village, again down that narrow road. I think this emphasises the narrowness of the road with this older properties and this stretch here coming up to the highway edge, and then the banked nature of the western verge here. And then further in towards the village, again, you can see the constraints of the road as we approach the junction with Norwich Road. In addition to the concerns over the width of the Brandeston Road and the lack of pedestrian facilities on it, the Highway Authority have also raised a specific concern with the junction of Brandeston Road and Norwich Road, which is here. This is seen from above, where you can see the tight angle at which the 2 roads meet, and then note this building on the corner, which restricts visibility. This is as you approach on the ground, and then as you can see from sort of setback from the giveaway line, the restricted nature of the visibility. Also with the angle of the road, this is obviously if you were beyond the giveaway line, and then again you can see the sort of tight angle where the roads come up. As such, whilst the benefits of the additional housing and the tenure types proposed are recognised, there are significant concerns with this proposal, both in terms of connectivity of the site for pedestrians and in terms of highway safety due to the constraints of the immediate highway network. Whilst a small element of trod footpath is proposed on the site frontage, and a passing place has been suggested that it could be proposed, this is not considered sufficient to overcome the deficiencies identified. Now, further to the report, the applicant is now indicating that they could mitigate the impact of the development in terms of nutrient neutrality with the woodland and pond area to propose here. In light of these, the concerns which we've identified with the highway, we haven't sought to explore this further, as even if this is feasible and the tilted balance could then be applied in regard to 5-year land supply, the adverse impacts would be still considered to be significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the scheme. And it's as such that we're recommending the application for refusal.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions for the officer, please? Yes, Councillor Beadle.
Yes. Did the Highway Authority also mention where Brandeston Road meets the High Street and near the marketplace?
No, they didn't go that. So the specific concerns they related to were the width of the highway of Brandeston Road up to the junction, and then the junction with Norwich Road. Whether those were the two things they specifically raised.
Yeah, because that junction is also a very difficult junction.
Yeah, there are quite a few constraints further north, yes.
Any further questions from councillors? No, I'll ask Mr. Gwynn and Mr. Cummins to come forward. Take the seats here, please. Yes, please. And when you're ready, you each have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, can I just say thank you, Councillor, Chairman, for this opportunity. My interest is twofold. I've lived in Corston for over 20 years. I use this road several times a month to cycle and walk. And I'm also here because of a neighbour several years ago had a very serious accident down that road. Life-changing injuries. She was a very good neighbour. I'm here for her as well. The proposed site, we know, is outside the settlement area. Now, I understand there is a Greater Norwich local plan in development, and it's in its advanced stages, and it's likely to be adopted in 2024. I believe it runs through to 2038. This site is still outside that settlement area for that plan. Housing allocation is available in Corston on another site. It's unused, but it's off Gayford Road, Alsham Road. So the idea of additional housing being needed, we know it is. That's already there, but it's unused. It should be noted that the primary school is almost very near to capacity at the minute. There are at the minute 2 other building sites in process to provide various housing. Brandeston Road is really a single track road. There's no passing places. It's 3 meters wide. I know it, as I say, because I cycle down it frequently. Other people's driveways, as you've seen from the photos, have to be used for cars to pass by. I don't think they're very happy about having their driveways used for traffic to pass. ROSPA, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents, state that the groups are most vulnerable of injuries on roads are children, older people and disabled people. As I said to you, I had a neighbour who had life-changing accident several years ago on that road. The vehicles most commonly involved are obviously pedestrians, accidents, cars, vans and light goods vehicles. ROSPA also states that a walking route should be continuous, it should be direct, it should join up the residential area to local shops and schools with well-designated footpaths. The walking routes should be safe and they should feel safe with clean, comfortable, clean, smooth surfaces in all weathers. The suggestion of a trod path comes nowhere near ROSPA's advice. It's a very narrow road. There are very high banks. There's no street lighting. It is a dangerous path. And I would say really no public-minded public servants with the vested interests of parishioners, people with disabilities, older people, children and families could give consent to the building of this site because it is a very dangerous road. And I speak as someone who uses it very frequently. Thank you for giving me time to say these things.
Thank you. Mr. Gwynn, you'd like to continue?
John Cummins.
John Cummins, sorry.
That's it. John Cummins, thank you for this opportunity to speak. I also live in Corston.
it's a narrow country road, and it also leads out of it's one of the few lanes leading out of the village, which is not going anywhere particularly important. So it hasn't been too heavily used. So it is an amenity for the entire village. People walk out there, people take their dogs, people cycling, people running, people riding horses. Not all times of day and night, obviously, but it is an amenity for the village generally. And that is what is threatened by this development, which represents a 40% increase in the houses which are down that road. It is going to make it harder, a less hospitable place for people to walk. There are no, as has been mentioned, there are no pedestrian footpaths down there. Up by the junction with Norwich Road, there is a housing development of 5 houses which are on the site of what was 21 Corston Road. They're going to add to the traffic which is using that road. But anyway, it's a very poor junction, and anybody encountering that as a pedestrian will not have any footway. They don't at the moment. So the visibility is poor. You can't walk round the inside corner because of the oncoming traffic from either direction. So all the foot pedestrians are going to be walking across that road with the increased traffic trying to make its way out of the junction with Brandeston Road. If there's an increase in traffic there, it's going to make it less safe. There's some things about the description of the application which I take issue with, one of which is that there are no boundary features of note and wire fencing on north, east and west sides. There is a wire fencing on all sides, but that's inside. There's inside the there's hedges to the east and the west, and on the western side, which is the border with Brandeston Road, that's blackthorn mixed with blackberry, although not at, as you've seen on the photograph, not at the northern end of the proposed development site, but the rest of it all the way up to Wood Farm and beyond. There's hedges on both sides, so that isn't included in the ecological survey. So that survey itself is flawed because it's only based on one visit to the site in February, when any flora and fauna would be dormant because it's winter time. So there hasn't been a proper ecological survey done. I think the plan is misconceived because it doesn't provide anything which is not already being provided within the village. In other words, there is housing being developed, as I've mentioned, on the site of 21 Corston, 21 Norwich Road, and there is further planning at the end of Norwich Road to the eastern end. So it's not there are other. What I'm trying to say is there is provision within the village for development, and that is being undertaken. So it's not that this provides something unique which is needed at this place. It's a country lane. It's a nice place to go. It's going to be lost if the planning goes ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions for the speakers, please? No? Thank you. If you could just turn your microphone off and then return to your seats, please. Thank you. And I'll call Mr. Thompson and Mr. Eggleton forward, please. And when you're ready, you have 5 minutes each, gentlemen. Can you put Mark?
Broadland Council's motto is community at heart. This scheme has been devised to help foster that ethos. We have designed this scheme to give local families the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to build or rent high-quality, low-maintenance, low-running cost housing. I've already had people approach me for both. The last time a single plot came to the market in Corston was 15 years ago. The plots come onto the market, you have to be in a position to buy, generally within days, competing against developers. That's not time for the local people to sort out finances. This scheme gives local families the time to be able to get their financial ducks in a row without pressure. The scheme gives them the chance with a 20% discount that could be life-changing. We have committed to planting 1/4 mile of hedging, an acre of native woodland, and to dig a pond to help the environment. Highways would have you believe that there is no official footpath and it is dangerous to walk on what is a very quiet road. They have objected on different grounds, one being no footpath. We will install for the length of the site, which equals 1/3 of the distance from the crossroads, a footpath. It will serve not only the site residents, but also the many people that use that stretch of road every day to walk to the field footpath at the south end of our site. And by agreeing to pay to move the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit sign to the south end of the site, it would mean that all walkers would not have to move on what is now a national speed limit road. Not far from the site, another site has been passed for housing. That does not have a footpath, but has many more times traffic. Although the remainder of the road to the village doesn't have the designated footpath, the eastern side of the road, as you can see, has many driveways and openings where pedestrians can stand to let vehicles pass. Highways have highlighted there could be 30 vehicle movements a day. If you break that down, it equates to 1.25 an hour. It takes 12 seconds to drive from the site to the crossroads. If half the vehicles went that way, it would equate to 8 seconds of traffic per hour, which is hardly moving on the A11. Prior to us buying the site, it was home to about 70 cows. Every day there were tractors, loaders, lorries for livestock, plus other assorted farm vehicles using that same site on that same road. They also highlighted the junction in the village has restricted vision. One easy remedy would be to require households to cut back their overhanging hedges, which at a stroke would make a vast difference. The junction joins the Norwich Road, as you've seen, on a 90-degree bend, which sounds dangerous, but in fact has the opposite effect, as all traffic has to slow right down to get round that corner, and it makes it much safer as a result. They state that there is no designated passing places to the south of Brandeston on the Brandeston Road. There are, however, dozens of unofficial places, gateways, entrances to fields, wide flat verges. That's before we install official passing bays. They also state that because there is not a footpath to the village, people will have to get in their cars to access amenities a couple of 100 yards away. People who live on that road, that includes myself, obviously didn't get that memo because we use that road to walk to the village on a regular basis. The planning officer has stated in his assessment that the scheme does not strictly meet affordable guidelines, as there is less than 50% rentable. I would say that for Corston families buying a plot with a 20% discount, they would find that as splitting hairs. They also say that Broadland is meeting its affordable housing, but none of it is in Corston. I love my village and I'm in a fortunate position to be able to help Corston families to get ahead and stay in the village at the same time. This scheme does not tick all the planning boxes, but please don't let that deny local Corston families the once-in-a-lifetime chance to buy or rent an affordable dream house in pursuit of a box-ticking exercise. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for letting me speak as well. I'm Mark Thompson. I'm the planning agent for this application. Planning balance is a key matter, as it always is, because no proposal results in a complete lack of any harm. It's already been mentioned that we've completed the nutrient calculator, which shows very clearly that the nutrient flows can be mitigated on site. And that, of course, triggers the tilted balance because of the lack of a housing land supply. There is only one area of potential harm, which is highways, and the NPPF gives a clear steer on the planning judgment to be used on highway matters, setting out that development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the impacts on the road network would be severe. So it's quite a high bar. And there are three strands to this with this application. There's the junction with Norwich Road, The applicant has already mentioned that generally drivers moderate their speeds around the junction, and that's reflected in the safety record. The last accident at the junction was in 2007, so around 15 years ago. It's difficult to see how the very modest amount of additional traffic would result in an unacceptable impact on the safety record at that junction because there aren't any accidents. The road outside the site is indeed quite narrow in places, and there are informal passing bays just worn into the verges to allow vehicles to pass. The access to the site will provide another informal passing bay, and the applicant agrees to 2 formal passing bays. So there'll be 3 additional ones rather than the one that Highways assumed. And I think this is a net improvement on the operation of the road rather than harm. I did check, there have been no accidents on the road in at least the last 5 years that I checked. And it's used by vulnerable road users such as pedestrians and cyclists who clearly see it as a safe road. As for whether it's safe to walk in the absence of a footway, an analysis of pedestrian casualties over the last 23 years across the entire village failed to find a single casualty. This can't be described as dangerous. People aren't stupid. If it's dark, they carry a torch or they step onto a verge if there's a car coming. It's also worth looking at a site being allocated in Reedham on Mill Road by the railway. There's no footway on Mill Road, nor the other road, which is Harley Farm Road, and it's not possible to deliver a footway. And it's described in the GNLP Reg 19 version as having minimal constraints. That's minimal. And this is for around 30 homes with all the additional traffic associated with that. So it's very unlikely that the operational efficiency of the local roads, the impact on them would be severe as required by the NPPF. And it's very unlikely that the impacts on road safety would be unacceptable. Be that as it may, because of the housing land supply, the harm has to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the proposal, of which there are many. There's the significant biodiversity net gain through the new boundary hedges, the pond and the woodland, and this will also improve the landscape structure and help with the transition into the countryside. It'll provide much needed 3-bedroom housing, which is in short supply in Broadland. 3 of the dwellings will be self-built and available to local people at a 20% discount. 2 will be for rent, and again will be offered at a 20% discount and made available in the first instance to local people. Being single story, that'd be suitable for older people and disabled people. It's perfect for smaller builders who are desperate for sites at the moment. The energy efficiency standards that the applicant's committing to is higher than required by building regs. It's low flood risk, no amenity impact, sufficient off-road parking. Being detached houses, they kind of reflect the character of the immediate area. And the low ridge heights will again provide a nice transition to the open countryside. So we think that the harm is very unlikely to significantly and demonstrably outweigh all those benefits. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions for the speakers, please? Councillor Karimi.
You mentioned you're providing a footpath. Is it a footpath or a trod path?
Well, it'll be a trod path, but it'll be one that I think the King has down in his building site down in Devon, where it's a hard gravel and hardcore footpath. So it's not going to be just a mud footpath.
Okay, because to me the 2 are completely different.
Yeah.
A trod path will be very difficult for pushchairs, wheelchairs to go along.
But this will be one with, well, I said, which is hardcore and gravel.
Okay.
So yes, it will be a one that you can use wheelchairs and the like and pushchairs on.
And how wide will that be?
It will be a 3 to 4 foot footpath. That will have to be agreed with Highways.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for the speakers, please? No. If you could just turn your microphone off, please, and resume your seats. Thank you very much. Right, over to you, councillors. Councillor Beadle.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a narrow lane. Doesn't matter how you dress it up, how you describe it. This is a narrow lane. I do go down there occasionally, a couple of times, maybe half a dozen times a year, and it doesn't matter how you dress it up, it's a narrow road. I sympathise with one of the objectors when they said there was an accident there making life-changing injuries to a resident. My previous parish I lived in, there was a gentleman who tried to get off the road and climb a bank, like the photograph showed here, fell over backwards into the road, and I'm afraid that was the end of it. So I don't think the safety facilities of passing in other people's gateways and driveways is adequate. If this footpath along the front of the curtilage of this site is adequate, it still doesn't get over the fact that there is no facility from the site to the Norwich Road, and that junction is not a good junction. And yes, traffic does slow down there, has to, because it's a nightmare getting around it. And if you meet a big van or a HGV coming the other way, there's a question of who gives way first. No, Chairman, I don't think we should approve this.
Okay, so you're recommending that we go with the
Yes,
officer's
Chair, if you're seeking a
recommendation,
proposal to refuse, and the
Yeah.
officer, as the officer's recommendation, I will do so.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor Riley.
Yes. I can see that the applicants, Chair, have thought about what they're doing and put together quite a good case actually in terms of local needs. And I can see how they've spent some considerable time on looking at that. And there's much to this that actually attracts me in terms of our policies. A lot fits in terms of our needs, locality, etc. However, it's balance. And the current planning policies around GC2, TS3, I'm afraid, just do not fit with the application. And I think it's pretty straightforward in that respect. And therefore, I could not support the application.
So you're seconding the refusal?
I will second it, but I'd like other people to have a debate. They may actually put up another proposal.
Yes.
So I'll hold back from seconding, actually, let a debate happen.
Okay. Anybody else wish to speak? Yes, Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'd also echo what Councillor Riley has said about the ethos of this development. I think it's got some really strong principles, which I think are important in that we're providing homes for local people. And as you're saying, at a discounted rate. My problem is the access, in the same way as I said at the previous application. I'd be guided by highways, and highways here are quite strongly saying they have severe concerns about it, and that's a balance for me. I like the idea of the site and what you're proposing, but its location, from what highways are saying, is just not a sustainable location, or it's the access is so risky. So I'm on the fence on it at the moment, so I'll let my colleagues speak, but it is a balance for me. Thank you.
Councillor Leggett.
Yes, I find it a great balance because I've had the privilege of knowing Corston and that, but I just feel that the narrowness of that road is concerning me, and in where the proposal is. I think on balance, Chairman, I would support the officer's recommendation in this case. Thank you.
Okay, so you're seconding Councillor Beadle?
Yes, I'm prepared.
Yeah. No, he did. No, he didn't. He withdrew that. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Any further comment? Well, for myself, it's a very finely balanced one, but I again come down on the side of the officer's recommendation, I think. So can we go to the vote then, please? It's proposed by Councillor Beadle, seconded by Councillor Leggett, that we go with the officer's recommendation for refusal as set out on page 37. All those in favour, please.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Chairman.
And against?
None against, Chairman.
Abstention?
1, 2 abstentions.
2 abstentions. Okay, so that is refused. Thank you. We'll take a 5-minute comfort break, please. Thank you. Next application, application number 3, 2022-0923, 75 The Green, Freethorpe, being presented by Officer Chris Rickman, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is to vary the planning obligations associated with planning application 2020-0261, which is to reduce the affordable housing provision on the site. So the 2020 application granted outline planning permission for the redevelopment of a vacant commercial site to provide 19 dwellings, as well as the retention of an existing office building and the provision of a new access road. The outline application included 5 affordable dwellings, which equated to 28% affordable housing on the site. Now, a Section 106 planning obligation may be changed or discharged in 2 different ways. After 5 years, this can be done through a formal application process, known as a Section 106A application, or if it's within 5 years of the obligation being completed, which this application is, then it can be done by agreement with the local planning authority. So, as I say, as this obligation in question was only completed in 2021, it is therefore less than 5 years old and can only be varied by agreement with the local planning authority. So just to put the site and the application into a bit of context, I'll just go through the slides. Not got too many to show you, but this first one is just showing the kind of geographical context. So this is the green where my mouse is just running through, which is the main kind of road through Freethorpe. So to the north of the screen would be the A47 coming into Freethorpe, obviously through the green. You've got the post office located there. The application site is in this L-shaped parcel of land here outlined in red. And then we go further south, you've got the primary school and the village hall just off the screen. And if you were to go further south, you'd lead to Reedham. So this is just the site location plan. Doesn't give you too much more information, but just a bit of a close-up view. So this was submitted as part of the original outline application. As I mentioned before in the description of the application as well, the site was a former commercial site. It was a petrol filling station and garage site, or the majority of it was, with the remainder being a paddock. As you can see, there's several buildings on the site. 3 of those have been removed, these 3 to the north. And this building here is the existing commercial building, which is being retained, with the 19 dwellings being situated around that. It's also worth noting that the site is within the defined settlement boundary for the area. And this is actually the final slide, but is a site plan. So a few things just to note on this plan. So first of all, you'll see it's labelled as an indicative site plan. That's because there's currently a reserve matters application which is being dealt with at this moment in time. It hasn't been determined as yet. It is in the final stages. So although it's likely that the layout you see before you here will be the which is approved under the reserve matters application, there is still some chance of that being changed. It's worth noting as well that this application that we're considering today, however, is not looking at changing or making any alterations to the layout, the design, or the size of the properties. Something else to note is that within my committee report, I noted that there are some other benefits of the scheme which will be brought forward, notwithstanding this application. One of the things I noted was the bus stop upgrades, which they're just off this plan, but they pointed out here just south of the site. You can see, you might be able to make out a kind of square here, which is the one on the west side of the road, but there's one on both sides of the road which will be upgraded. And then the other thing to note with this slide is the affordable housing provision. So all of the properties marked with a red or a blue circle were the 5 properties which were originally or currently the obligation sets out are going to be the 5 affordable dwellings. The proposal is for the 3 marked with the red circles to be carried forward as affordables, and the 2 blue or the properties with the 2 blue circles would then be market dwellings. So I'll just leave that slide on the screen. So as part of the applicant's submission, they have submitted a viability assessment which has reviewed the viability and recommended that the scheme is not viable with any affordable dwellings at all. The council then instructed the independent viability consultant, CP Viability, to review the findings of the applicant's viability assessment. Their assessment showed that the viability pressure scheme had increased since the Section 106 was originally signed, and they anticipated that this was due to the recent sharp increase in build cost inflation. CP Viability's assessment also showed that the level of developer return with 5 affordable units would be below the level required to bring the site forward. And they stated that the appraisal testing shows that the scheme is only viable with a maximum of 3 affordable housing units. So having regard to the findings from CP Viability, a negotiated position has been sought on affordable housing, which would see 3 affordable dwellings retained and the other 2 becoming market dwellings. The planning practice guidance sets out profit margins in the region of 15 to 20% of the gross development value may be considered a suitable return for developers. Now, whilst this range is referred to in the context of a plan-wide viability testing, it is considered to provide a reasonable indication of profits for individual cases such as this. To give some context to this then, so 3 affordable dwellings would equate to approximately 15% profit. So that would be the lower end of what the MPPF have set out would be a reasonable profit margin. Overall, the council are happy that the viability assessment has been carried out correctly. The other elements of the scheme, as I alluded to, will still be secured, such as open space and green infrastructure contributions, the footpath widening outside of the site, and the upgrading of the 2 existing bus stops as shown on the plan. It's also worth noting that if the council were not to agree to the variation, then the applicants could submit a full planning application with the viability information submitted, which would be a material consideration. Overall, it is considered that it would be reasonable to reduce the affordable housing level to 3 dwellings, and the council would also like to include a review mechanism within the deed of variation, which would allow a re-examination of the scheme should the market conditions improve. So for these reasons, the recommendation is to agree to the variation of the planning obligation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do any councillors have questions for the officer? Councillor Nurden.
Thank you, Chairman. Very good report from the officer, and thank you for the work that's been done with regards to the viability assessment. I'm just concerned that there is an outstanding enforcement case in respect of this development, which has not been resolved, to my knowledge. And it does bring into question the integrity and the regard or maybe disregard of this planning authority. What I would like to put out there is that possibly that this enforcement case be resolved before a decision is made. Just as a thought for the members to consider. And I would like a response also possibly from Mr. Reckman with regards to this enforcement case, because I did mention to him before this meeting. So I know that he has done a little bit of investigating in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you. There's not a huge amount to say, if I'm honest. There is an enforcement case open. It was opened on the 4th of October. And that was with regards to a commencement being carried out on site ahead of all the conditions being discharged and approvals being granted. That is currently still being looked at. Enforcement to visit the site shortly, but they haven't visited as yet. But I would say that that is completely separate from this application, and I don't think has any bearing on how we determine this application today.
Thank you. Do any other councillors have questions for the officer? Councillor Riley.
Yeah, just picking up on this matter, I don't exactly know obviously we don't know the exact nature of this. But I'm accustomed in other applications to seeing least on 2 occasions, the enforcement issue cleared before it comes before planning. I don't know if you've got any recollection. I believe the application we had at the, not last plan meeting, but application before that, meeting before that, in regards to a gate with retrospective. Again, the enforcement on that was cleared out before we got here with the area manager, who did a very good job on that, by the way, before it got here. So if you just clarify that a bit more, because it does actually clear the way properly then for the planning committee to have consideration. If you just clarify a bit more, please.
I think I'd like to give you assurances that any obviously breach in planning we will investigate. Chris has already said we're investigating that, but we do need to look at the merits of this proposal in relation to the Section 106, and we will ensure the permission is adhered to in relation to the conditions already on it. So you can continue to make an application. I think it would be very difficult to say you cannot grant this permission until an enforcement is checked out, because it may be checked out tomorrow. I think what we need to do is actually look at the affordable housing request to be modified for this application. I give you assurances that we are checking out the breach that is brought to our attention in October, and that will continue to be so, but I don't think you can hold one up against the other in this case.
Councillor Beadle.
Therefore, the chairman, the implication of what's been said is that the developer started on site to build this out. Is that correct?
We received a neighbouring comment to say that there may have been a start. As I say, enforcement haven't looked into that or fully assessed that at the moment. So it might just be that there's been some site clearance and enforcement could come to a different view. So it's speculation at the moment as to whether there's been a start, but that's part of the enforcement process in terms of getting to the point of assessing that. Obviously, if there has been a start, then they would take the necessary enforcement action.
Thank you, Chairman. And then something different, the calculation for the profitability of the development. How is the site value determined? I see it's mentioned in the report.
I'm going to need to refer to my notes here, but so in very general terms, the way it's valued is that they run an initial appraisal, which is based on all of the inputs to give a residual site value. And if the residual site value is above the benchmark land value, which is effectively a hypothetical, the minimum price that a hypothetical landowner would accept for the land, if it's above that benchmark, then the scheme is considered to be viable. And if the residual land value is below that figure, then it's deemed to be unviable. In this case, obviously, both the applicant's assessment and also our own independent assessor have both come to the conclusion that with 5 affordable dwellings, it would be unviable.
What concerns me a little bit, Chairman, is that on the one hand, it's been says in the report and indeed this morning that people have determined that it's not viable at 5, but yet the application was only approved last year. And so what has changed last year? Can I say in the last year, a big development in my ward has actually increased the number of affordable houses from 22% to 28% because house prices have gone up. So I would have thought in the last year it's more likely that the 5 was more attainable than having to reduce it to 3.
I think obviously these viability cases can only be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. The assessment is pretty thorough in terms of what's been submitted and also what CP Viability have done, and they're a reputable kind of consultancy that carry out obviously a large number of these schemes. So we've obviously taken their expert or been led by their expert view in terms of their assessment of the information that's been put forward.
Thank you. Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your report. It's very comprehensive. I've just got one question, if I may, please, and it's picking up on representation made under 4.3, and also the Parish Council have raised concerns about the road access to the development. One of those is saying that they believe the road needs to be wider. My question is that a highways adoptable road? It looks from the outline on the screen to be having separate pathway with the road, but I wonder if you could just clarify that for me, please.
I believe certainly the first part of the road, the internal road, I believe you're referring to, would be adopted by highways, with the area to the rear unadopted, I believe. The applicant's agent is here today, so I might be able to confirm that later as well. But that's my understanding of it. With regards to the points you made reference to 4.3, which is from a neighbouring resident. I believe that they're kind of mainly in relation to the scheme as a whole, which is currently still being considered as part of the Reserve Matters scheme. So they will be fully assessed, but under that separate Reserve Matters process.
Right. Any further questions from councillors to the officer? No, thank you. Then if Mr. Moore would like to come forward, please. And you may speak for up to 5 minutes if you so wish. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak. I don't wish to say too much, really. I believe what the planner has put forward is very appropriate for the site. It was only the last question. So the road itself on access is 5.5 metres wide. We've produced extensive turning head details as well to make sure that fire tenders and refuge trucks can turn in and out the site and attend to all properties. And pathways, I think, on entrance up to the commercial building are 1.8 metres wide and then narrows to 1.5 on both sides. And this gentleman's comment as well, I think we're conditioning this, aren't we? So if anything does change in the market to that extent where it needs to be reconsidered, that is what we are accepting of. So I think that's covered. Cheers.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the speaker, please? Councillor Beadle.
Thank you. I presume you're the applicant and the owner of the site, a developer. Yeah. And could I ask how long have you owned the site? No, I said, how long have you owned the site?
I don't know.
Sorry,
I'm the agent.
agent. So how long has the owner of this site, who you're acting on behalf of, presumably, owned the site? Are we looking at months or years, or are we looking at decades?
I mean, the application has been in for well over 6 months now. It should have owned the site for over a year now. I didn't say more than 3, but that is my assumption.
Because the circumstantial evidence is that maybe they've paid too much money for the site and therefore they can't afford the affordable housing.
It's all been covered in the viability assessment very extensively. 2 companies have been commissioned to do that report, and the evidence is there.
Okay, does anybody else have a question for the speaker? Yes, Councillor Vincent.
Thank you for coming back on my question. Just want to clarify, if I may. So if we're looking at the plan on the screen, it's the grey road. It's going to be the dimensions that you've said, and the ones behind will be the unadopted, so it'll be private roads. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Nothing else. If you'd like to resume your seat then, please, and over to you, councillors. Yes, Councillor Riley and then Councillor Karimi.
Chair, I'm concerned about this application in terms of the full reduction of the affordable housing, because there's been 2 independent companies used here, both independent companies with accreditation, as I understand it. First companies say it's not viable with any affordable housing, etc. And the second one says, well, in actual fact, we agree not with 5, but 3. So you've got 2 independent companies. We've had to, Broadland's actually, paid out for 1, which is quite right, by the way, completely. Of course, we pat ourselves on the back for doing that. But you've got 2. Therefore, I think there's a little bit, and there always seems to be actually with me, a little bit of a subjective calculation that's to be employed here, which is a little bit of a guesstimate. There's no way out of it in terms of the formulas with price of land, etc., etc. So I'm really concerned about how we arrive at this with two independent companies, one saying one thing and the other one saying the other thing, and eventually for our discussion then agree on three. So I don't know, Chair. I always think that the judgments on this and how they get to them are a little bit subjective, actually, and the calculations for them. And the one thing I do like about this is, though, which the area manager said, is that in between now and build out, or in between now and site progressing, that if it was proved that the economic situation was different, then you'd revisit it to change that situation from 3 up to 4 or 5. I did like that, by the way, because I thought that has actually made a lot of sense, bearing in mind how these things vary. So I'm not happy because this, and I've seen it before, Chair, as well, not only here, but London, everywhere, actually. So I just have to say that because it's quite frustrating when we see this sort of reduction happening, you know. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just come back on that? Because I just want to give some assurances. So when we receive a viability by the applicant, we go through a consultant, which is a verified consultant to act on the council's behalf. They've done their due diligence. They didn't agree with the viability as submitted, and they challenged the assumptions made within that viability. And as a result of that, the calculations have been redone to come out to say that they can actually deliver 3 affordable. And Councillor Riley's quite right. We do need to put that what we call a clawback within that provision, as the market may change, that we need to relook at that. This site was a brownfield site, so it did have obviously demolition on it. It was a previous site undeveloped. So I think we have to look at the evidence before us. We have no other evidence. I think what I am pleased to say and assure you is that the consultant that we employ to do his due diligence and actually challenge the developer's viabilities has acted out on our behalf and actually come up with a conclusion based on industry standards that the site can come forward with 3 affordable. And with that clawback, we have the evidence to actually make sure we do get the best out of this site.
Councillor Karimi.
I think Councillor Riley's just reiterated what I wanted to say. I am unhappy that the affordable housing is being reduced. But if we do have that clawback permission in the conditions, I'll have to see how I vote. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councillor Nurden.
Thank you, Chairman. With this clawback assessment, is it possible that if this is looked at again and the redoing of the viability assessment says that no, it actually shouldn't be 3, but it should be 2, where's that going to put this council with regards to its position with regards to reducing or increasing the number of affordable homes and our policy? Thank you.
So if we were to agree to and the obligation was to be varied to the 3, then the review mechanism wouldn't allow that to be lowered. So what it would do is that if the developer profit, at the time of the new viability appraisal, if the developer profit was to rise above what it currently is, which is, I think it's 14.45%, then that would be regarded as a surplus. And at that point, then that uplift would normally be shared between the council and the developer. But that would not be done until approximately 80% of the scheme was sold, is when we would look at that. So then the agreement would also ensure that any further sales would then be put on hold until the review was complete, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
As I understand it, is that you've come to an agreement. It has to be by the local authority. Helen, is this correct? Therefore, with local authority, this is the agreement for the minimum of 3. Once that goes through this planning committee, that is it. If you come back for lower, you'd need to come back to us if it was.
Yeah, they would need to come back with another viability. We have seen that happen, but we'd have to look at it on its own merits, and then you have to balance out all sorts of things. So yeah, we would look at that. And just to clarify, that surplus is normally a clawback through a community sum, so we can use it on affordable housing. That would be how it would work on this site.
Yeah, thank you, Ellen. That is helpful. The affordable housing is really developed to benefit the local community. And you talking about if there is a surplus above the 14%, if you do a further, you indicated that that would go to the council, which is Broadland, and it could utilize that. However, is it, and this is just a thought, is it not possible that if there is a surplus determined sometime at the future, that the benefit of that commuted sum, as you refer to, can be ploughed into some community benefit in Freethorpe, rather than it being determined that it could be spent anywhere else within the Broadland district?
Normally, because we're looking to secure affordable, it would be for affordable provision. So that would be the cascade that we would normally look, because we're looking for obviously achieving the affordable provision. There would be a cascade for that, and we would have to, that would follow our normal procedure. So this is something that we do use on a regular basis to ensure that the council does not lose out on, the developers' profits being more than what they said in their viability, and we're sure that is coming back to the council to be able to spend on affordable. It doesn't mean to say that if that can't spend, we could look to vary that again and spend it elsewhere, but we are looking for affordable rather than other community benefits at this time. But that would be the normal trigger and mechanism that we would do on our affordable housing agreements.
Councillor Leggett.
Thank you, Chair. I may have missed it because of my hearing, but I still am a little confused. As a review mechanism be included within S106, which would allow a re-examination of the scheme should the markets improve. Who takes the initiative then as to making this review? Where does that come from? I'm a bit confused because it's just in writing.
It's within the Section 106 agreement, and then they will have to submit information based on sales prices, what's happened through the market, and then we get that evaluated. It's within our 106 as a trigger that we will monitor and enforce. The developer has an obligation to submit that information for us to reassess.
The developer has the obligation to report to you.
To us, and then we have that verified.
Right.
There again by an external consultant, because they are the specialists. Yeah. So we don't just take it read, we will have that scrutinised and looked at by an expert.
Councillor Beadle.
Thank you, Chair. In the course of my career, I've actually had to do budgets and costings and verify, cross-check one with the other. And can I say it's a nightmare? And I'll just say that there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. And when the council does come to scrutinise this, and I'm going to say I'm going to support the officer recommendation, but with a very heavy heart, then that they do it robustly. Thank you.
So are you moving officer's recommendation? Right, well, I would like to move officer's recommendation, which is to approve the variation of section 106 to reduce affordable housing from 5 affordable units to 3 and include a review mechanism within the section 106. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Right, Councillor Brutton. Any more discussion before we go to the vote? All those in favour of the officer's recommendation? Thank you very much. Right, we'll move on to 2021-1071, land north of Bintry Road, Forsham, being presented by Officer Glenn Beaumont, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Morning, everybody. So this application seeks planning permission to create a plant training area with associated parking and 3 portable office buildings at land to the north of Bintry Road in Forsham. Application is reported to you because the recommendation is contrary to the provisions of the development plan. And in terms of updates, received an updated layout plan yesterday, which won't be in your presentation, but will be in this one and will be in mine. We've consulted Highways on that for 14 days and await their comments in due course. And that's reflected in the recommendation, which is to delegate authority to approve the application subject to no adverse comments being received from Highways. So that's in hand. To remind you of the key considerations then, they are the principle of development, impact on the character and appearance of the area, impact on amenity, ecology, and as I previously mentioned, highway safety. So let's look at the site and see where it sits in relation to the surrounding area. The yellow disc in the bottom left-hand corner shows the location of it just to the southwest of the main part of Fulsham. Just poking on the bottom left-hand corner is the A1067 Fakenham Road, and the giveaway to get into Fulsham is the big white water tower as you go past, I think it's the Bordeswell Garden Centre. Along here, it's about half a mile from the A1067 to the site. You can also access the site from the south, and it's about a mile to the A1067 from there. Looking at the map that's within our development plan, I'm just going to zoom in on this. So the application site, if you can make the cursor, let me just move it. Here we go. Follow the arrow. The red line denote the settlement limits. Immediately to the site, we've got the settlement limit, which covers a range of employment uses. Immediately to the east of the site, you've got an industrial estate, which is occupied by a number of companies. And then to the north and the northeast, you've got an allocated site for employment and in an old train station area. Probably also a good time to talk about the principle of development as well. Although the site's outside the settlement limit, we've got policy 5 of the Joint Core Strategy, which talks about generally supporting suitable employment opportunities and commercial opportunities and applications in urban and rural areas. In addition to that, the site has previously, or parts of the site have previously been granted planning permission for commercial uses. We'll see the site plan for that at the moment. And although I'm not aware that those applications were implemented, they nevertheless are a consideration for you to be aware of as you assess this application, as they weigh in favour of it. Here we have the close-up overhead map, and perhaps to get your bearings a bit more, the application site is more or less triangular shaped. It doesn't include this building here, but kind of runs alongside it like so. We've got a sewage treatment works to the north, agricultural land to the west and south, and then the industrial estate immediately to the east. Also got the old station area here, and there's different types of commercial uses taking place in there as well. Nearest residential property is a bungalow. If you can just make out the cursor there. And that is, depending on where you measure it from the site, that's between 85 and 100 odd metres from the application site. So the nearest part's about 85 metres here. Centre of the application site is about 145 metres to there. But we'll look at that in a bit more detail later. Looking at the previous plan, dating from 2014, you can see the extent of the red line just here, and we'll be able to compare that with what we've got for the in the next slide as part of the current application. Just to remind you, in the report it sets out is for to use this former cattle shed and the land around it for a construction company. And here we have the application site. So this is the cattle building, former cattle building, which is not within the application site and is not under the ownership of the applicant, as it's not edged in blue. Just to the right-hand side here. It's probably quite small on your screen, so I'm just going to zoom in on it a bit more. Okay, so we have within the site, we've got some parking spaces for staff, 2 full-time members of staff, 1 part-time member of staff, and trainees as well. We've got a turning area for an HGV within the centre of the site, and then we've got a horseshoe arrangement of portable buildings, which will accommodate a kind of a welfare building, office, and a training building. In terms of some of the distances, you're looking at about 11.5 metres from the nearest part of the office or the portable buildings to the front boundary, and that distance is about 35 metres from a 3 metre wide margin around the edge of the site. Ooh, gone too far already. 3 metre margin around the edge of the site, which is partly to provide a bit of relief for the trees and the hedges, but also to provide a biodiversity margin around it as well. As we turn to the photos, this is taken from the west. I'm going to zoom in again. So what you can see here is the road leading down to the site. You've got these commercial buildings in the distance just here. And then you can see the boundary. You've got the hedge along the front section, and it becomes a bit more open along the rear section. Now, as part of condition 3, we're looking to secure some additional planting along that boundary. And that's part of the ecological mitigation enhancements as well, but it also has the added effect of helping to soften views in and out of site. So we're just going to travel down this road and go down the face of the site. So this is much closer to it. You've got the access just here, and you can see the closer you get to the site, the less visible it becomes, because the views become slightly more blocked by the boundary and the roadside hedging and planting. So we're just going to scoot around the front. And this is a gap in the hedge where you can just see the boundary I was talking about, which was a bit more gappy up there. As we pivot round, we've got the commercial buildings and the adjacent industrial estate just there. Portable buildings are going to sit probably roughly where the cursor is just here. And then looking within the site, this was taken last year when I did my first visit to it. This is the cattle shed, again to remind you, not part of the application site. Bit of open storage going on. There's no activities associated with the application taking place, so there's no digging or anything like that. This building appears to have been here for quite some time. I'm afraid I don't know its use, but there was no one on site when I visited either last year or a couple of weeks ago as well. You can just see the rear boundary is denoted by these trees just here. And then this is to the left of that building, just looking up the western boundary. So looking in terms of the impact on the character of the area, clearly the character of the site is going to change in its appearance, but with the help of some planting along that western boundary, my view is that with conditions relating to limiting external lighting and also the height of any spoil heaps, the impact is not going to be so significant that it warrants refusal of the application. And then we're going to look at the relationship now between the neighbouring units. So this is just to the east of the application site. The access is just to the next to that national speed limit sign just here. And this now we're going to start looking at impact on neighbour amenity, and this is probably the better one to look at. So the nearest property, the access to it is just on the far right hand side. These buildings look relatively modern in terms of their construction, and they are fairly solid looking as well. So you can see the brickwork. They cover the whole extent of that eastern boundary close to the application site. And in view of that distance and the barrier effect provided by those buildings, my view is that the impact on the amenity of that neighbouring property will be acceptable, notwithstanding the comments provided by the Environmental Health Officer. It's quite a significant distance, and the barrier is close to the source of the noise as well. Operating hours are fairly limited. There can be no, because of the way the training structure works, there can be no floodlights or training in the dark. So it's all done during the daytime. To remind you, hours of operation are 8 till 5 Monday to Friday, 8:30 till 1 on Saturday, maximum of 6 trainees. Clearly, there'll be some variation in the number of employees on site throughout the year and number of trainees as well. And so having regard to all of these issues, my view is that the impact on the appearance of the area is acceptable, the impact on neighbours is acceptable, ecological matters can be satisfactorily mitigated and enhanced, but the application, it's important to note, also provides employment and training opportunities for people involved in the construction sector, for which there is a well-known national shortage. Bearing all of those factors in mind and the planning history of the site, the recommendation is subject to no adverse comments being received from the Highway Authority to approve the application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right. Questions to the officer, please. Councillor Beadle.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask the officer to put the slide up again for the showing the boundary of the commercial area, which has been designated for commercial use? The plan with the red line around it. No, the thick red line. No, it encompasses the it identifies the commercial properties or the area for commercial development, which includes part of the station yard. Yes. Can I say I find this one a bit puzzling because it appears to include a large part of the curtilage of the old station house and the property behind it, which I think is something like called the ticket office or something like that. It's, as far as I'm aware, there's no significant commercial activity in the western part of that blue area. And I believe it's part of the curtilage of the two residential properties.
I visited the site last week or the week before. I mean, it's fair to say there's a bit of a hodgepodge of things going on down there. My observations were that there was a low-scale amount of storage going on down there, which appeared to my eye to be commercial. But I would certainly accept that it is of a fairly low scale.
And what about we haven't mentioned it at all about the impact on the residential properties on that site at all. The one you're talking about, the impact is not of those two.
During my visit, my observation was it was the property here. That's a residential property there. This is the nearest one that I've had regard to. To my mind, this one is sufficiently distant away for me for this to be the main consideration. But in view of the distance from it and the fact that we didn't consult them on it, because they don't share a residential boundary with the property, with the application site, I've not included it within my assessment.
Chair, I understand why the officer's saying that, but the curtilage, I suspect, of the residential properties includes this area which has been described as a hodgepodge of activities, and the amount of commercial activity there, I think, is minimal, if at all.
Right. So rather unhelpfully, the label has somewhat got in the way. Yeah, I mean, I suppose to some extent I can only really go on what I saw on the site and my observations from both driving and walking around the station yard. There's not really much more I can say, I'm afraid. I mean, it didn't strike me as being a residential curtilage. It struck me as being low scale commercial use. My observations were that it wasn't residential curtilage, and I don't see any reason to change my assessment of that, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor Karimi, then Councillor Prutton.
From the photos, there's some lovely trees around that area. Can you confirm that none of them will be taken down, please?
Yeah, there's no intention to remove any of the trees, and also as part of condition 3, we've got some ecological mitigations and enhancements being proposed as well, because you've got that 3-metre wide margin around the edge of the site. But yeah, to directly answer your question, no, there's no intention to remove any trees.
Councillor Prutton.
I'm looking at the 4.1, the Fulsham Parish Council response to the consultations. in which someone has declared concern about the possibility of the open drainage ditches and streams, risk of pollution if anything accidental happens during the training sessions or something. Is this a valid concern, would you say?
All concerns are valid.
All right then, how valid is it? Because one person on the parish council says, let's go for it. Someone else on the parish council says, oh, I'm against it. I mean, you get this on all parish councils.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's important to know the type of activities that are going to be taking place at the site. It's a training and digging and rolling type thing. So the types of vehicles that are going to be on there, you've got the road rollers, which I'm sure a number of us have seen on the A11 recently. And we've also got the telescopic diggers. So it's it's not a kind of an industrial type of process, if I can put it like that. There may be some risk of spillage from, for example, diesel, if somebody's not looking or maintaining their tanks properly, but that's not going to be taking place on the margins of the site, for example. And so I would say the risk is pretty low.
Minimal.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your information. Thank you.
Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Glenn, for your report and presentation. Just a couple of questions around residential amenity. One thing I was going to ask was around the lighting, given that the opening hours are from 9 till 5 and it'll be dark at 5 in the winter. Well, am I correct in hearing that there won't be any outside working?
That's correct. As part
so
of, as part of the application, as part of the training exercise, they're not allowed to do any training in the dark. They can't issue a certificate. It's daytime training only, and there's no intention to provide floodlights.
Okay, thank you. That's answered my question, so thank you very much. The other was around noise and picking up on the environmental quality officer's comments in paragraph 4.3, recommending a condition be attached requiring a noise assessment and remediation if necessary. Has any further thought been given to that? I don't notice that that is one of the conditions attached.
I've attempted to discuss that in section 5.6 onwards of the report. 5.8 particularly is of interest, where I talk about the noise unlikely to be constant and also the distance and the barrier effect provided by those buildings in the industrial estate.
Thank you. And my final one was to do with parking and the concerns raised by Highways. I know you said that they're being requested further information. Has that been forthcoming, or are we still waiting for that?
No, this is the plan that came in yesterday. So it's this one here. That's with Highways at the moment, and their comments are awaited.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Sure.
Yes, Councillor Riley.
I'm picking up on the same point that Councillor Vincent's picked up on, actually. The machinery that you're talking about is extremely noisy. I've hired millions of pounds worth of this in my lifetime on site construction. It's extremely noisy. You have the reversing beepers going on, and there's concerns here within the report about that noise, and the environmental officer under 4.3 as well has recommended a noise assessment. I think that is more than reasonable given the extent of these noise, the extent of the noise. It's not as if you're sitting inside a factory that is, got heavy presses going on. It's an entirely different situation. And these properties are only, 145 metres away. That is really close in terms of that level of noise, backwards and forwards, reversing, etc. So as it stands at the moment, I'm not actually seeing an adequate rebuttal from you in this report under 5.3 as to why that noise assessment shouldn't be done as the environmental officer has recommended. Would you like to add anything else to that?
No, I think I've covered it in my report and in the presentation. I mean, clearly it's open to you to stipulate that condition is part of the permission, and perhaps you may wish to debate that further.
Thank you.
Any further questions from councillors? No, if you can turn your microphone off, please. Thank you. Is Mr. Olby here? No? No. Okay. All right, well, it's over to you, councillors, then. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, Highways Chair. I'm not of a mind to approve this application today, and the reason for that is that Highways have put in a holding objection, and it's been recommended to us that we accept the application subject to then Highways contacting the authority, and then judgment being made in terms of whatever they put forward. Now, the issue with this is, I believe that, and the agent's been contacted to supply, as the report says, this information to yourselves and Highways. Not done yet. So in terms of holding up this application, I think that would be an issue with the agent. So in that regard, I know that in the past, there's been a recommendation from Highways under TS3 on some applications not to proceed, but we have had recommendations from the officers to proceed. So it's that judgmental issue within there, and I think the committee should actually receive its full report and what it's recommending or not recommending, really, before it comes before the committee. Therefore, I'd be moving later on, Chair, we'll get a second for this or not, that we defer it until the Highways report comes in. I think that's a prudent thing to be doing, because at the end of the day, you know, there has to be some judgment about this in terms of any recommendation. And the recommendations have met with different views from officers in the past and recommendations to this committee. So it's not clear what would be the result of that. Also, of course, I've got the issue anyway that I'd like to see a condition in terms of the environmental officer's point about noise as well. So at the moment, I'm in favour of deferring this, waiting for the agent to get through to the Highways and come back with a response, because they have put through an objection, a holding an objection to it. I've seen that on the report. Thank you, Chair.
Chairman, if I may, this is the drawing. This is the additional information that was requested by Highways, and this was received yesterday. So this is what has gone to Highways yesterday. We've reconsulted Highways on it. So this is the information that they've requested. As I said earlier, we've reconsulted Highways and we're awaiting their response.
Exactly, that's my point.
In addition to that, the recommendation is to, if Highways doesn't object, that you allow me to approve the application. If it does object, we come back here.
Chair, I'm fully aware of it. That's exactly my point. So I'd like to see what it is Highways are saying to this committee, and I think we should defer it until that happens.
If I may, Chairman, the other thing I would say as well is that it's a holding objection based on an absence of information, not based on the principle of development. So that it's not a flat no. We're not going to do Highways. A flat no from Highways. We don't like anything here. It's a no for now until we get the information.
I know, understand.
Can I just add to that? And I really accept Councillor Riley's point on that, and obviously relating to the second point about whether you not want the noise condition as suggested by the environmental services officer put on as well, is obviously, we've said why we don't think that's a reasonable condition, and obviously it's for members to decide. But relating to us having delegated authority subject to no objections from the Highway Authority, is that because we don't want to delay the application if there are no objections. So if we bring it back to you with no objections, then obviously we would still be recommending approval to you. What I want to assure you that is if they do raise objections and they're not happy with it, we will bring it back to you. But there is, we do need to look at applications to determine in a timely way where possible. So if we get the comments back later this week or early next week, the applicant is having to wait 3 weeks for us to report back there are no objections. So I just wanted to assure you that we are only asking for delegated authority if there are no objections from the Highway Authority. But obviously, if there was, we would bring it back to next committee and actually say, this is what they've said. They are raising concerns, and we will either, put a new recommendation to you or not. So I just wanted to give you a bit of assurance on that. And where possible, we want to do timely decisions, especially where they relate to employment generating uses.
Yeah, could I just have one point? I fully understand that. And what I'm seeing here, though, what I've read, is that the agent, been waiting for the agent to get this information through. So there's some obligation on the applicant in terms of, getting their information through in timely manner for this committee, I would suggest.
Yeah, and as Glenn said, we've now got that information. We've consulted on it, and the Highway Authority could come back very quickly on that and say, yes, they're now satisfied, and subject to the car park being laid out as suggested, they have no objections. And that's the only reason we would be allowed to delegate that decision from this committee.
Councillor Vincent and then Councillor Karimi.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Helen and Glenn, for that explanation. I'd noted in paragraph 4.5.14 that subject to no adverse comments being received by the Highways Authority, and you've got a condition to say any reasonable conditions recommended by the Highways Authority. So I feel comfortable about that. I still have an issue or a concern about the potential noise. So I'd be happy to move the officer's recommendation, but with an additional condition for a noise assessment as recommended by the environmental officer.
Okay. Yes, right.
Can I
Yes,
agree
Councillor
with
Karimi.
Councillor Vincent on this? I would prefer a condition to be put on to require a noise assessment. Presumably this is our own environmental officer who's recommended this, and I think to ignore his advice would be foolish, and it would show the residents nearby that we are taking noise seriously. Thank you.
Any more discussion? Councillor Beadle.
On a different point, Chairman, on the indicative layout of the turning of the HGVs, it looks to me as if they're trying to get the HGVs to do a 3-point turn on site. Is that correct?
I read it the same way. Yep.
So, Chairman, on that basis, isn't there a temptation for HGV drivers to actually do a reversing off the highway, especially if there's going to be vehicles parked outside the buildings?
I think this is why we've consulted Highways for their expertise on that, on the ability to manoeuvre in and out of the site in an HGV. So as much as I'd be able to give you a firm view on that, I think until we get the Highways view on that, it's not something I can answer with any degree of expertise on manoeuvring HGVs.
I just view with concern HGVs having to do a 3-point turn on site, and especially such a tight manoeuvre as indicated on that sketch. I don't suppose anybody's done HGV manoeuvre assessment on that layout, and I presume the Highways will do that before they come back to us. Chairman, if we do approve this subject to Highways, can we ask the Highways that they do comment on whether it is a good idea to have 3 HGVs doing a 3-point turn on site?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's certainly something I can clarify for you with them. Ask them to do, rather. That's probably a better way of putting it.
Thank you. Any more discussion before we get to the vote on this?
I support Chairman Councillor Vincent made.
Yes, it's proposed by Councillor Vincent, seconded by Councillor Karimi, that we go with officer's recommendation as set out on page 53, with the addition of noise assessment being added to the conditions. So all those in favour?
Yeah.
Against? 1. Okay, thank you. That takes us to the next application, 2021-2306, Furbank, Green Lane, Horsford. And we have, yes, thank you. Claire Curtis presenting, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application we have now is for
Sorry.
Thank you. Okay. This application we now have in front of us is at Horsford, as Furbank, Green Lane, and it is for outline planning permission for 1 dwelling and associated works. And let me just make the screen a bit bigger for us all. Okay. So the site is located to the southern side of Green Lane, to the rear of Furbank, and has a separate access leading to the plot to the rear. So this is your site located here. While we're on this plan, I think it would be quite useful to point out a few things to members' consideration. The existing development boundary runs along here and down this way. So it's key that the site is outside that development boundary. Members may be aware that we had an appeal on the site in this location here, which is referred to in the report. And in the supplementary conclusion that I've actually added, which has pulled some more things together for your consideration. For 6 dwellings, we also was granted consent. And in that particular appeal decision, the inspector considered that the location was a sustainable location, had access to public services and transport, and also that the provision of those dwellings in that location did not create a harm to the form and character and the landscape setting of the Horsford. Key also, which is raised in the supplementary, is a recent appeal decision that we also had back on the opposite side of the road, located diagonally from the site in the location here, which the council was successfully defended, and that was dismissed. Now, in that case, it wasn't on sustainability grounds, it was on the harms that it would create because of the nature of that side of the road. So I think I want to try and pull this out while at the beginning of our considerations, because there is a step change, in my view, between the character of this side of the road, where you are having the proposed individual one dwelling, and the opposite side of the road, where we've just successfully defended a reason for refusal on harm in landscape terms. So the site at present, let's go to the location plan. So existing residential properties. This is a neighbouring property. I think you may be aware that we've had a lobbying letter from that neighbour. This is their residential annex ownership, but it does actually benefit from an independent access and has an existing workshop on the site. So I think we need to bear that in mind in our considerations. It has its own access and has a sort of a workshop use on the site. The moment the site is has got sort of small trees on it, we have had an arboricultural report submitted with it, and there is a proposal to remove some trees to facilitate the development. Again, I'll come to that, and I'll show you some photographs to give you context of the site. So originally when it was submitted, and you'll probably note from the agenda that it was actually for 3 dwellings, which we felt was not acceptable, was overdevelopment and created a number of issues. And the application is subsequent between what was originally proposed and also what we now have in front of us. So in front of you now is the proposed location of the new dwelling. They are looking to retain part of this existing building, which is a workshop. Again, this is existing property that owns the site, and this is your neighbour and their annex. So to give you a context there. This is a tree survey that relates purely to the for the new dwelling, and you can see that there will be some small trees removed, but it retains the boundary trees and hedgerows. And what I have suggested is that we do add an additional condition to the list you have with regards to the retention of trees and hedgerows that is not shown to be removed as part of the tree survey, the arboricultural report. So let's just turn to some photographs so we can get a context. So this is your entrance into the site, existing entrance, and you can see that there is vegetation on either side. This is the third bank, which is what I would call the host or the owner property. And this is your planting along your boundary, looking into your site, and then this is looking back towards the road. As you can see there, the gates that I just showed in the photograph. We're moving now into the site, and this is the building that I showed on the plan, which is to be retained and taken from the driveway as you come in. And then we've got a photograph looking across to the neighbouring property, Oakdean. Again, this is a building that was now into the main part of the site. This is part of the building that is to be removed, and the building that was retained is behind that. And you can just glimpse in the background the new large residential dwellings, the development that wraps around this site. So that's another consideration. Again, there's some photographs within the site giving you a flavour with driveway position and looking east and north and east. I'll just battle through these, I think, a bit. This is the new development, that big estate that's down to the south. Okay, north, back into where the application, the main host dwelling is, the driveway access and the Oakdean's boundary. Okay, so this is Green Lane looking west. And then we're looking, now we've moved to, and I think this is just key because part of the, we can come back to this if necessary, part of the requirement of this new residential development that's been given consent under appeal was they had to do some highway safety and off-site highway improvements, including footpath links. The Highway Authority have raised no objection, but they are asking for this proposal to provide a footpath and passing bays as part of that development to link up. So they're wanting to try and make that sustainability link with the consented appeal site. Right, so unlike the application that I previously presented to you, which was outside the development boundary, but not caught by nutrient neutrality, this particular site is within the catchment. So the balance that the officers have made is not that one of a tilted balance, harms outweighing the benefits of the provision of housing in the supply. This is purely being based on the fact that it's outside the development boundary. It is caught by nutrient neutrality, so it will not be providing you with dwellings immediately. However, there are policies within the development plan that allow us to give consent to something outside the development boundary, provided it does not create any conflict with the other policies in the plan. So that's the principal context that we're looking at this site. So the material weight we have in this particular instance is, as I've said, is the fact that we've had that appeal allowed here. We've got the major development going off here. That's your application site. This site is what I would say contained within the built environment. It's surrounded by existing residential development, so therefore your harm to your landscape is not there, in my view, and our assessment. So then we would look at the other policies in terms of residential amenity. What impact does this have? There has been concerns, as you can see from your agenda, relating to potential overlooking, loss of privacy, noise and disturbance. You've had the lobbying letter overshadowing. Now, the previous scheme was for 3. Now we've reduced it to 1. I think in terms of its ability to be sited within the centre of the plot, I think it wouldn't give rise to any overshadowing or overlooking if sensitively designed in terms of its window placements. And I think overbearing impact and loss of light, etc., carefully designed. It has acknowledged that there will be disturbance potentially through the construction of the dwelling. However, you've already got an independent access serving a workshop. That would be a temporary issue, and I don't think on those grounds you would be able to refuse your application given that construction, noise and disturbance. Equally, one of the issues that the agent has raised subsequent to the publication of the agenda is that we're wishing to restrict this application to a single story only. Having reconsidered this condition, I think that you could accommodate something perhaps it's a 1.5 story with careful design and location of windows, because I think given the fact you've got chalets around the site, you've got 2 stories to the back. If your concern is in terms of the impact on the amenities of Oakdean, the neighbour, which is one of the considerations, I think you can do the careful placement of windows without affecting their amenities. So I'd wish, with members' agreement, to change that condition to enable it to be perhaps a 1.5 story with rooms in the roof, carefully positioned as not to give rise to a detriment, and we would have the control because we would be dealing with the reserve matters. In terms of highway safety, I've mentioned no objections subject to those off-site highway works, which we have had confirmed and would be a condition of your consent. So in terms of your trees, I've mentioned those, and we'd ask the additional hedge tree retention condition just to make sure we are retaining what should be retained on site. So to conclude, Chairman, given its context located within a built form surrounding centred developments, it doesn't give rise to a harm in landscape character terms, and it does accord with the other policies within the development plan. Therefore, subject to satisfactorily addressing the requirements under the habitat regulations regarding nutrient neutrality and the completion of a unilateral undertaking for the GIRAM tariff, we would recommend approval, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, councillors, Councillor Karimi.
It doesn't say
to
on the condition what the time limit is. If nutrient neutrality isn't sorted out in the next year or so, is that going to affect the time limit?
This, we would suggest, would be a standard time limit that you would normally give
3
for a new
years.
dwelling. Yes, because we couldn't issue this until we have dealt with the nutrient neutrality. So I think that is that step change I mentioned to start with. We're not saying this is acceptable under our land supply deficit. We're saying that it's acceptable because it's outside development boundary, but it meets your other policies.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Chairman. And just a question to clarify about the workshop. I'm assuming in the original application where there was 3 dwellings that would have been removed. Just wondered, is there any risk that workshop could be developed under permitted rights, development rights?
So you're absolutely correct. Under the previous, I'll just go to perhaps a bit slightly more helpful plan. Under the original 3 dwellings, yes, it was going to be removed. It is now looking to be retained as an outbuilding in association with the domestic curtilage of fir banks. So my thought process with that would be for domestic purposes only. It wouldn't have its own independent access anymore. So I'm comfortable in the fact that that wouldn't give rise to an issue.
So if we thought that that was going to be ancillary to that dwelling, is there any possibility that that could happen, that could be developed and have a shared access without us adding a condition to remove permitted development rights?
The agent is actually with us this morning, who could probably just clarify. I think given the fact that they are taking quite a lot of the workshop down, and the proposal is to take it into their curtilage, my view is that that would then be domestic. There is absolutely no reason, if members were seriously concerned of its use, that we couldn't actually ask for that to be auxiliary to, as auxiliary to the residential use of the fir bank, as opposed to any commercial purposes.
Any other questions from councillors for the officer, please? No, thank you. Would Mr. Bloomfield like to come forward, please? And when you're ready, you have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members of the Planning Committee. My name is Graham Bloomfield. I'm from William H. Brown, a land and planning partner there and agent for the application. First, I'd like to thank officers for their hard work on the application. Delighted to receive a recommendation for approval. And also thank you for Claire for a very comprehensive report. I've been striking lines through much of my presentation because she's covered most of it off, actually. Picking up just on the workshop point, actually, if I may, this is actually one that came to us as a probate case. So it was an elderly relative who passed away. The applicant and his sister have acquired the property. He's actually a teacher based in Hong Kong, but he's coming back to the UK and will be taking on Furbank as his property. So the intention of retaining the workshop was actually for a bit of privacy for himself from the new development and sort of garage. So the workshop that's retained is almost the core of that building, and the bits that are being removed are more sort of shanty lean-to elements that are of reasonably poor construction. So it actually provides a little bit of a buffer for the two sites. So there is no intention to to develop that independently. As I said, sort of the application itself is for a single new family home, and we've worked collaboratively with the planning officers to reduce the number of dwellings from 3 to the scheme that's in front of you today. The proposal for a single new home has effectively addressed the consultee responses. The parish council didn't object to the scheme for 3, but did raise some matters. The revision to a single new home has, in their words, lessened their concerns. The ward councillor did call the application in based on 3, suggested that a scheme for 2 would be more acceptable, but again, no further comment or objection was received to the current scheme for a single home. Conscious of comments from Oak Dean, we have been in discussion with them, sort of formally in terms of the application process. They didn't offer a formal objection to the single dwelling, but I am conscious you've been lobbied, and obviously I haven't been party to that information. The other thing to point out is there are no objections from any statutory consultees. The local highway authority has recommended the upgrading works to Green Lane for passing bays and footways, and my understanding is that work is already being brought forward with the scheme for the 6. So the condition that the highways officer has put on is almost a fail-safe, that if the scheme for 6 doesn't bring that forward for any reason, our scheme is liable to do so. But I understand that's all in train through a Section 278 process with the local highway authority. Trees have been covered. I'm happy with the suggested sort of additional condition that's been proposed. The trees on site are generally poor quality, sort of Leylandii and that sort of thing, but they do provide a good level of screening. They provide some biodiversity enhancement, and therefore the ones that are being removed, as you've seen from the photos, are relatively small, sort of shrubby trees, and a lot of them are already compromised by the existing workshop building. Turning to the principle of development, I think we'd largely agree with the appraisal set out in the report and the presentation. It's a sustainable location for a new home and a natural infill with its own access. It's utilising an independent and largely redundant area of extended garden, surrounded by development on all 4 sides, with modern estates to the south and west from Barrett David Wilson. So therefore demonstrably not an isolated location under paragraph 79 of the framework. Set out by officers, the position outside the settlement limit is not determinative for this application. It's a natural infill surrounded by newly constructed homes, and the planning appeal decision for the 6 new homes east of Oak Dean confirms that it's a sustainable location, good access to services and facilities, on the edge of a service village and in accordance with the development plan as a whole. And I think those arguments are equally applicable to this site, if not more so, it being slightly further west down Green Lane and closer to those service and facilities. And I think that the sort of introductory to Claire's presentation sort of summed this up, the officer's presentation summed this up, in that it almost feels like the settlement boundary hasn't quite caught up with what's actually been built on the ground here. It is surrounded by modern housing development. I think the point about the recent appeal decision also makes a clear distinction between that southern part of Green Lane that is suburban in character and has a built footprint, and that more open character to the north. Finally, I sort of welcome the discussion on the sort of single story condition. Again, discussed this with Claire recently, and I think our view is that it would be premature to restrict it at single story at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, do any councillors have questions for the speaker, please? Yes, Councillor Cramy.
Just as a matter of interest, have the plans been drawn up for the house yet?
The way we do the drawings is that we only provide an indicative scheme, so we don't provide all the floor plans and elevations. That would come at a detailed stage. But the architect we use generally bases it on schemes that he's already done elsewhere. So it is a house that could be delivered, if that makes sense, but we don't show all the details. So in essence, it would be a sort of family, I think it is based on a sort of chalet footprint for maybe a 3-4 bed family home.
It'd be interesting if we had the plans to actually show them on the presentation. I know we haven't got them now.
I think it's because it's an outline planning permission and we're agreeing whatever we see now isn't what we're allowing. It's actually, you know, part of that reserved matter, that final design and layout, which we obviously have control to make sure that fits in with the locality and doesn't have any impact on neighbours.
Any further questions for the speaker, please? Yes, Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. Just looking at our report under other representations, a concern was raised about the shared water supply. I don't know if you could help enlighten us on that.
Yeah, it's a point I think was raised by the neighbouring property, and I think it's one that came up also around the appeal for the 6th to the East of Oak Dean, and effectively sort of wasn't seen as an issue. You know, didn't raise concerns in that application. I think it's a matter that would obviously have to be dealt with under, again, the sort of detailed application, the reserved matters application to follow. But there's nothing from what we've seen that would give us cause that you know it couldn't deliver and couldn't have a satisfactory water supply or impact upon others.
Thank you. Any further questions? No, then if Mr. Bloomfield would like to resume your seat, please. Thank you. And over to you, councillors. Councillor Beadle.
Thank you, Chair. Can I say that if I was a resident of Fairbank or Oakdean, I would really feel aggrieved by finding myself in the middle of housing developments, which have all been built outside the development boundary. I would really feel aggrieved. But having said that, we are where we are, and I would like to propose the officer recommendation as is, Chair.
Thank you. I'll be happy to second that. Thank you. Councillor Riley.
Yeah, Chair. I support this application, and I'd just also like to say, Claire, what report? I think the way you reported, Claire, is absolutely first class, by the way. I think the report's very thorough, but I think also the way you've reported it and you've stepped the committee through it was actually top class. It's a compliment from the committee, I think, is due there. I think everything fits here. We've had this before in the planning committee going back over years. Outside development limit, what's the material considerations? Does it mean if you put it in, you're going to have further encroachment? This one fits. I think there may be people recollect here and officers where you've had it on the edge like this. It makes absolute sense, and I've supported this sort of thing in the past, even when we've had a recommendation not to from the officers. So everything fits on this, and it makes complete and utter sense. Any development on the other side of the road would be resisted outside the settlement limits. The geography, the landscape does not fit with material matters. Quite well explained, Claire, I thought, and fully support the recommendation.
Thank you. Any more discussion before we
apart from point 5, we just need to clarify. Point 5 at the moment states single story. You were saying, Claire, that 1.5 story, but have control under the design in terms of overlooking and light from windows under reserved matters. If that's the case, that needs moving as well, Chair. I believe, Helen. Yes, I'd move that for 5.5, Chair.
Yes.
We also suggested additional condition, which was retention of the trees.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll move that as well, Chair.
Yes. Well, with those 2 additions,
I didn't
proposed
need
by
moving,
Councillor. Yes, Councillor Riley, seconded by myself.
Okay. Brilliant.
All in favour? Thank you very much. Thank you. That brings us on to appeals on page 65. There's only one on there.
Yeah, nothing to add to that. That's one that's just been submitted. So obviously we'll report on that in due course.
Can I just ask why? I know that house. Can I ask why that was turned down? Do you know?
I haven't got that to hand, but it is
No.
on our website, the reason for refusal.
Is it? All
Yeah,
right.
sorry, I
Okay.
haven't got that to hand.
Right, thank you. Okay. That concludes the meeting. Thank you very much, everybody.